All right, it's 6:30 Eastern time. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Um, Welcome to the eighth and final night of the 2024 Master Beef webinar series. Like I said to some folks earlier, we hope you're staying dry out here in this lovely Tennessee rainy weather we're having this past week. Um, we hope everyone's doing well and hasn't been washed away yet. Hopefully we're starting to wrap up these storms, but with all that being said, we're excited to have Dr. Lalman here with us tonight from Oklahoma State University. As a few of housekeeping rules again, if you have any questions, please drop those in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll get those answered tonight. If you have any questions regarding attendance or if you need to watch a recording, please reach out to me or your local extension agent and we'll put you in the right direction. But with all that being said, we'll let you get started, Dr. Lalman. I think your mic may be off. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
I am famous for being muted.
That's okay. No worries.
I was just saying that thinking about you all out there, maybe at least some of you in the path of that hurricane. It sounds like it's just about landing in Florida now. Is that right? Anyway, we could use a little bit of that rain here. It's been really dry here in Oklahoma. But I was tasked to visit a little bit about beef cow nutrition and genetics and beef cattle. And of course, our program here, my primary emphasis is the genetic by environment interaction. And of course, the environment, it largely is made up of the nutrition of a beef cow. And so that's what we'll spend our time talking about here tonight. And I want to just start off with a few kind of introductory comments, big picture things I think we need to have in perspective. Forage efficiency in cows is a big deal. And particularly for you all there in Tennessee, where I know most of you on the webinar tonight would be, managing or perhaps own a forage-based beef production system. Obviously, the reason why it's really important to have a good view of the big picture is because the cow-calf enterprise uses 74% of the feed energy needed to produce 1 pound of carcass weight. All right, so just think about that for a minute. 74% of the feed energy required to produce 1 pound of carcass weight is used by the cow herd. Now, fortunately, this is what ruminant animals are good at, and that is converting sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide into a high quality human food source. And so we're thankful for that, because these ruminant animals can make good use of these forage resources that you have in Tennessee and we have here in Oklahoma. It's interesting, though, that economic programs such as the Kansas Farm Management Association, the Center for Farm Financial Management in Minnesota, they analyze farm records from all over the country. Kansas is pretty specific to the state of Kansas, but the Minnesota program analyzes data from, as far east as Tennessee and as far south and west as Southern California. And their data indicates that forage and supplemental feed costs continue to be the overriding factors driving profitability in U.S. cow-calf operations. And we're going to dig into that just a little bit more here in just a minute. But that's kind of what I wanted to suggest to you to set the stage. But I want to also give you a little bit different perspective on our history. And I think the history of the beef cattle industry maybe is a good thing for us to keep in mind as we watch and see what's going on now. So let's take a quick stroll down memory lane. Some of you may have seen this if you've seen some of my presentations, but I just thought you all might enjoy this. We had a department head here at Oklahoma State University for some time, long before I arrived here at OSU, but his name was Dr. Robert Toddshek, or Bob Toddshek, and he was famous around the country as a really good livestock judge. And, of course, later on, he would become the department head. He gave a presentation about the history of the beef cattle industry. He had already retired. I had just arrived here as a young faculty member, and he gave some of this presentation that I'm going to show you now. Again, I just wanted to give Dr. Toddshek credit for this information, and just really thought it was very, very impactful. Okay, so it'd be interesting if I'm gonna show you two periods, and if you identify with either of these, it'd be fun if you type something in the chat about it. But Dr. Toddshek indicated that in the 40s and 50s, the beef cattle industry entered into an era of insanity. Okay, and I was at this meeting. He had retired, but I was at this meeting watching him give this presentation, and you could see people kind of sit back and perk up and think, well, what in the world is he talking about? Some of you already have probably guessed what he is referring to, but this is a picture of the 1953 Grand Champion Angus female at the Chicago International Exposition. This is not just some random picture. This is the grand champion of the, most impactful, biggest livestock expo in the world at the time. And so that's a really big deal. And somebody had decided that shorter, fatter cattle represented progress. Okay, and so I refer to those as belt buckle cattle, but some of you maybe have memories of this era, maybe showing our age a little bit. But then Dr. Toddshek indicated, that era and that aggressive selection for those traits led to a lot of problems. I spent a little bit of time at the University of Missouri office next to Dr. John Massey. It was late in his career, but he had spent most of his career trying to help the industry get away from or get out of dwarfism. And that came from that era that Dr. Toddshek referred to as the era of insanity. And then in the 1960s, there was a period where the industry realized all the challenges and problems that selection had created. And so there's a recognition for the need to change. This is another pivotal photograph or picture of the beef cattle industry and a real pivotal moment in our history. This is a picture of Conoco. Conoco is all over the walls in Weber Hall at Kansas State University because he is famous because he was the first crossbred steer slapped as grand champion at that same Chicago International Expo. This is 1969. This gentleman back here in the back is Dr. Don Good. Okay, Dr. Good would later become the department head there at Kansas State University. But he slapped Conoco, this first Charolais Angus cross steer, as a grand champion. And I think his message to the industry was at least twofold, and that is, number one, this technology, okay, at the time, crossbreeding would have been considered new technology. And his message was that the research data indicates that crossbreeding works and it improves many things. There's a lot of benefits to crossbreeding, and heterosis, of course, being responsible for most of that. but secondly, the type of cattle. Conoco might be a pretty nice looking feedlot steer today. He's larger frame, heavier muscled. He's a little leaner than the cattle from the previous era. Dr. Bob Kropp, another professor who was on our faculty here at Oklahoma State till just a few years ago, he retired, but he was in the stands as a livestock judging team member the day that Dr. Good slapped Conoco as grand champion. And it was fun to hear Dr. Kropp tell about this moment, because he said, you know how when a grand champion animal is chosen, there's generally a lot of applause and kind of a roar go up from the crowd. He said, you could have heard a pin drop when this happened. It was not a popular decision. Dr. Good was kind of swimming upstream, if you will. But, you know, our tendency in the cattle industry is if something's good, well, maybe a lot, a little more of one trait's good, a lot more is even better. And that's what Dr. Todashek, when he gave this presentation, referred to as the 70s and 80s, the industry returned to insanity. Now, late in this period, I was in high school, and I remember judging cattle then was not very difficult. You just chose the tall one, right? And if you remember that, and if you lived through that era, you might slip us a note in chat. But here's a picture of one of those long-legged tall cattle, you know, extreme aggressive selection for growth and particularly for frame size. This next one is one of my favorite pictures, representing again this era. This is a pretty famous Angus bull, you know what? First of all, how many of these guys standing behind that bull do you recognize? You know, the tradition was that when you take a picture of a bull, you stand, or a show animal, you stand behind that animal, regardless of whether you can see their faces or not. Well, then in the 2000s, you know, at least in terms of frame size in the beef cattle industry, here we are back again to where we were in the 60s. And so I just show you that little introduction just to sort of maybe give you the perspective that cattle are changing. And actually over time, when you look back like that, they've changed pretty rapidly since the 1940s, and they continue to change rapidly today. And so we're going to talk about some of those changes and how that impacts profitability on a grazing operation there in Tennessee. Okay, so let's talk again. This is where I'm going to dig just a little bit more into this idea of cost versus creating more output or production. This is the Kansas Farm Management data, and it's just fascinating data, in my opinion. So they looked at the top profitability farms, the top 1/3 of farms in their data set over a 5-year period, and the 1/3 of the farms that were the least profitable. Okay, if that makes sense. But the average of these third of the farms, the most profitable, was $460 more profitable compared to the bottom 1/3. $460 per cow more profitable. And according to their data set, 62% of that $460 can be explained by differences in cost of production. The other 38% is due to differences in gross income per cow, or more output, more productivity. Those producers that were the most profitable did sell more calves, so they did have slightly better fertility. They did sell heavier calves, so their calves did weigh more at weaning, and they did sell their calves for slightly higher price, so they were pretty good at the marketing program. But overall, the biggest difference, again, was the difference in cost. So now let's just talk about some of these traits and how maybe they relate to cost and outputs or productivity. Cow weight is something that's been kicked around a lot in the industry over the last 30 or 40 years. And we continue to work on aspects of cow weight today. But here you see two grand champions, one from 1835 and one from 1937, just to emphasize that difference and maybe aggressive selection one direction or the other. But as I think about cow weight, I think about the primary things that they're used for or indicators of. And number one, most of us use cow weight as a proxy for feed intake. Okay, we assume that bigger cows are going to eat more feed, and certainly as we continue to see that is true. They also is an indicator of the value at culling time. Bigger cows are going to bring more money when it comes time to cull those animals, and certainly that would be true today with the high cull cow prices we have right now. You would anticipate a pretty strong relationship between cow size and weaning weight. Well, it turns out we've discovered that at least here in Oklahoma, it's not as connected as you'd think it might be. We discovered here in Oklahoma on 7 different ranches that we measured cow weights at weaning time, and then their calf weights. Obviously, working with herds that had individually identified calves. But we saw a relationship of about for every 100 additional pounds of cow weight, we saw on some ranches increased calf weaning weight of about 6 pounds, and other ranches it might be for each 100 additional pounds of cow weight, you might get up to around 20 additional pounds of calf weaning weight. Well, the problem is the extra 100 pounds of cow weight, costs somewhere between maybe $50 and $70 per year to maintain. And so, that 6 to 20 pounds of additional calf weight isn't going to, there's going to have a hard time paying for that. Post-weaning growth, there is a pretty strong relationship between mature cow weight and post-weaning growth, a very strong genetic correlation. Also, cow weight is pretty highly correlated, genetically correlated to carcass weight. Okay, so what's going on in the industry then relative to mature cow weight? And here you see a genetic trend. Here I'm showing you the data provided by the Hereford Association. And you can see that mature cow weight continues to increase over time at a pretty steady rate. Also, selection for growth. I mean, it continues in our industry, if anything, by folding in genomic data here the last several years, we're probably actually able to accelerate selection for growth. It'll be interesting to see what happens over time. Also, the Angus Association produces the mature cow weight EPD and the yearling weight EPD. And here you see the mature cow weight EPD on the bottom. And once again, mature weight in beef cows, and at least in these registered cows, is increasing as time goes by in a linear fashion. And you can see the strong genetic connection between yearling weight and mature cow weight. So, what that suggests is that if you don't do anything to curb or control mature cow weight, you just continue to select for yearling weight, you're going to get bigger cows. And so that brings me to this slide. This is a USDA inspected carcass weights for steers in the blue, heifers in the red. Actually looks like just noticed I got that turned around. No, that's right. Steers in the blue, heifers in the red, bulls in the green, and cows in this orange color. And what I did was converted these cow carcass weights into a live weight using standard yield for a cow. It's somewhere around 50% yield, carcass yield relative to live weight. And when you do that and you draw this line from 1978 through this data, what it tells you is since 1978, coming out of maybe that, well, actually going through that second era of insanity right through here, what's happened is that it suggests that mature cow weight is increasing at the rate of about 7.3 pounds per year. So in other words, if we don't do anything different and we continue to select for growth like we are in the industry, 10 years from now, you would expect our cow weights to be about 73 pounds heavier. Well, here's those genetic correlations, and this is how cow weight is related to feed intake and cost in the cow-calf operation. Okay, weaning weight and feed intake, pretty strong genetic correlation. Post-weaning gait and feed intake, as you would imagine, strong genetic correlation. And of course, mature cow weight and weaning weight, a genetic correlation. So those are all tied together and are going to impact that. And in fact, I didn't bring a slide showing the genetic trend for feed intake, but it is definitely increasing in any of the breed associations that report that trait. Okay, so if we use cow weight as a proxy for feed intake, what are the indications or the implications relative to stocking rate? So I should have pulled together a Tennessee example here, but this is an Oklahoma example with a 10,000 acre ranch in north central Oklahoma. And I've got, here you see a mature cow weight on the bottom, so 1,000-pound cows all the way up to 1,500-pound cows. And if you're interested in the details on how this is calculated, I could let you know later, but we assumed a modest stocking rate on this native pasture-based ranch. And you can see that there's a pretty dramatic impact on carrying capacity on this ranch based on cow weight. In fact, it's interesting to me, some of you maybe would have started your career on your operation or as a cattle producer around 30 years ago. And so if you think about, this trend over a 30-year career, if you had made decisions on genetics in your operation and you selected only for industry average growth, this ranch in north central Oklahoma today should be running 130 fewer cows than they were 30 years ago. And that would put the same grazing pressure on that same land base, if that makes sense. So it can have a pretty dramatic impact, on carrying capacity. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about, we'll get back to cow weight here in just a little bit, but let's talk a little bit about feed intake in a cow-calf operation. And I want to ask the question, do feed intake EPDs work for beef cows? And this is one thing that we've really been working hard on here in our research program at Oklahoma State, this question, because it's really important. As you have seen, if we're going to continue to select for growth, and considering 74% of those feed inputs are from the cow herd, we probably need some way to be able to, restrict or control, if you will, genetic capacity for appetite or feed intake in a cow herd. Okay, so the challenge is that EPD that the breeds produce now, many of them provide, is that those tools are related to feed intake performance and feed efficiency in the post-weaning phase of beef production. Those diets where most of those animals are tested are energy dense. Okay, and so here you see a picture of the breed associations that provide a feed intake EPD and two of the genomic providers in the industry right now. My problem with that notion is that, here in Oklahoma, I don't know about Tennessee, but in Oklahoma, we only have about 2 months where we have a really high quality diet that would even get close to those energy dense diets where those calves are tested for growth performance and feed intake. You probably have longer periods in Tennessee where you have higher quality forage. And so this might not be quite as impactful to you as it is to us. But that's why our program is focused on finding cattle that thrive on moderate to low quality forage, because that 74% of feed energy used is going to be used, most of the time by consuming moderate to low quality forage in our conditions here in Oklahoma. Okay, so our research program, I just put up here kind of a group of ranches and other organizations like ABS. This family here is really giving us a lot of support to help us continue and expand our cow-calf research program. Very thankful to them for their contributions over the years. Many of these has provided genetics and other contributions to our research program. But let me just tell you a little bit about that. At the Range Cow Research Center, here you see pictures of it. We have tried to come up with a system where we can test this idea of, do feed intake EPDs work for cows? This research facility is designed for cows and calves. It looks like a little feed yard, yes, but it is not. It is designed for cows, and that's what we are studying: is long stem, dry grass hay diets on heifers and cows to see if if we can answer that question. Okay, so this is the primary result in studying concentrate diet intake and hay intake over several years now. These are the results that we've come up with. So what I want you to see here, there's several experiments where we got 7 studies here, I guess. These first 3 other people have produced in other parts of the country. These last 4 are my graduate students over the last few years. And what I want you to notice, and what this data represents, so forget about the average daily gain column for now, just focus on the feed intake column. Okay, these are correlations. Of course, the higher the correlations, the stronger the relationship, and they're positive correlations. A correlation can be negative, of course, but these are positive, and it indicates that by the way, I should have said early on, these cattle were all fed a concentrate diet, like a bull test diet, for a period of time, and then switched to a forage diet. And in our case, in these 4 studies, those cows would have been switched to a grass hay diet. And as much as possible, we have fed no concentrate, only mineral in these last 4 studies. Okay, well, anyway, when we did that, we looked at the feed intake while they were consuming an energy dense diet and see how they ranked. And then we looked at their feed intake when they were consuming forage and see how they ranked, and see if those rankings on both diets lined up. Well, these positive correlations suggest that they actually did line up. So maybe not perfectly. These are phenotypic correlations. The genetic correlation we'd anticipate would actually be higher than what you see here. But if they were big eaters on a concentrate diet, in general, what these positive correlations suggest is they're also going to be big eaters when it comes to forage. And that's a good thing. That's a very positive thing for our industry, because we already have those feed intake EPDs available. And based on this data, we are encouraging people to take advantage of those EPDs and not just look at it as a feed yard feed intake tool. We think we need to be using it for cows as well. Okay, now let's focus on the average daily gain column. This one is the shocker. So we have been selecting cattle now for 75, maybe 80 years. When we came out of that first era in insanity, based on which one of these 2 columns? Based on this column over here on the right. performance or average daily gain. Okay. And what this suggests, and generally speaking, at least in the bull test rations, you know, again, they're energy dense diets. And then what this data suggests is that when we tested cattle on strict forage diet for a period, and then an energy dense mixed concentrate based diet for a period, there was no relationship on how those cattle performed in those two environments. Okay, so be sure if you don't follow that, be sure and ask a question when we get to the question session, because this is really important, I think, for you to understand. But basically what it indicates, well, I think I've got that here in the next slide. Okay, this is just a quick summary of that data and kind of the take-home message. And that is the mixed diet intake, or energy dense diet, if you will, intake is related to forage intake. So based on that, we're suggesting that those dry matter intake EPDs already available will work to control appetite in the cow herd and help you control cow costs. The mixed diet weight gain, shockingly, surprisingly, is unrelated to forage diet weight gain. What does that mean? Well, that means that these growth EPDs may not reflect a cow's ability to thrive on forage. And the way we usually look at that in a ranching operation is their body condition score and their fleshing ability. How well do they maintain their flesh or fleshing ability, especially in a drought year or something like that? Well, this data suggests that you certainly, you probably can't rely on those growth EPDs to indicate that. Okay, so based on that, on those findings, how can you use this information now? I think this is really exciting and actually represents a good opportunity for a lot of people. So first of all, and this is probably going to be unpopular with some of you, that's okay. We can talk about it later. But what I've got here is I have downloaded, I don't remember now how many bulls are on this graph, but I have downloaded data, EPDs, from the Angus Association's website on several hundred of their proven bulls. Okay, what do I mean by proven? Well, I didn't put any bulls on this graph unless they had at least 0.5 accuracy for feed intake and for mature cow weight. So they had to have, they had to have several daughters in production. I don't know, maybe 30 to 50 daughters at least in production in order to get up to that 0.5 accuracy for mature cow weight. So these aren't yearling bulls or 2-year-old bulls. These are what I would consider to be, you know, obviously we'd rather have accuracy on both of these traits of 0.7 or 0.8. But I use 0.5, so I have a pretty good set of bulls to work from. The green dashed line here is breed average. So this is Angus breed average for feed intake EPD. This is Angus breed average for mature cow weight EPD. Okay, so in this top left quadrant, let me ask you, if you buy the data that I just shared with you, that these feed intake EPDs work for cows, and that the growth EPD probably doesn't reflect the cow's ability to thrive on forage, why would you do this? Why would you select genetics, you know, proven bulls that are going to increase appetite of your cow herd and weigh less? You know, yes, smaller cows, right? A lot of us think that, you know, moderate sized cows is the way to go, and I still think that is true. But this is an opportunity for us to sort some of these cattle out, because, you know, just because they're smaller in size doesn't mean that they're going to be lower in terms of cost or feed intake. Now, granted, on average, that is true. And here you see kind of a summary of that over here in this top left corner. All right. Secondly, let's look at this group of female or bulls right here. If you're going to purchase bulls or create females out of it in the future, you know, this looks like a pretty good opportunity to me. And you get to draw this square wherever you want to, and you can restrict it to, you know, whatever your core values are. But I'm just suggesting that this might be a pretty sweet spot if your priority, and I mean your priority, is to control cow costs. Use the feed intake EPD and select for breed average or below breed average, and then use the mature cow weight EPD and select for breed average or below breed average. And using those in combination should be a surefire way to help you control your cow costs over the years, and maybe even over time increase your stocking rate on your place. So I think that's a really exciting opportunity, and I like the idea of using both in combination to help accomplish that and reduce costs and improve profitability. You know, the problem with this is, yes, you're going to have moderate to below breed average cow size, and that would definitely lower cull cow income, but you have the opportunity to select for moderate post-weaning growth with those genetics. Okay, and then if you really want to reach out there and take a chance, you know, I think maybe you could do this. This bottom right quadrant represents sires that should produce females that are above breed average in mature body weight, but below breed average in feed intake or appetite. Now, how cool is that? You know, we're used to thinking about this as, you know, big cows are bad for the ranch because, you know, they're really going to suffer in tough times like drought, so on and so forth, and may not be as resilient as a smaller cow. But I am going to submit to you that we might ought to be thinking about cattle that can check all the other boxes. And by that I mean docility, good udder, good feet, you know, marbling, ribeye area, above breed average growth, and perhaps above breed average feed efficiency in the feed yard phase, but lower cost in the cow herd with bigger cows, because that would give you modest cow cost, increased cull cow income, and should be related to the opportunity to select for, at the same time, increased feedlot average daily gain and carcass weight. So I'm really excited about, you know, our ability to fine tune our selection to maybe do a better job of controlling costs in the cow herd over time as selection for growth continues. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of wrap it up here. We'll talk about this for just a little while, but I want to share with you some of the things that we are learning in our forage efficiency program. That's a picture of our hay feeders. We fit these hay basket on top of those individual animal intake units. And again, the data I'm going to share with you now represents cattle that are consuming nothing but long stem Bermuda grass hay and mineral. Okay. Oh, and by the way, I brought my little video to show you how we feed these. It wasn't a very good day. This is a pretty windy day, but I'll just show you how we fill these feeders. She's losing some hay there because of the wind, but that keeps us from having to buck square bales to fill these feeders, and it works really good. All right, so far in our research program, I think we're finding that efficient heifers become efficient cows. Now, we aren't the first ones to study this. Dr. Harvey Freetley at the Meat Animal Research Center published a really good paper here just a few years ago that basically said the same thing. But thus far, early in our research program, we're finding that to be true. And what we're looking for is moderate heifers with moderate forage intake, but the ability to gain weight and condition while consuming that strict hay diet with no supplement. And this Bermuda grass hay we're using, is going to have 11% plus crude protein. So yes, it is nice quality grass hay, but it's grass hay. Some of the other publications, you kind of get me going on one of my pet peeves, but some of the other publications we see are based on a forage diet, which is corn silage and maybe some alfalfa haylage or something like that, or combination. And our cows in Oklahoma just don't get to see that kind of a diet very often. That's pretty high quality diet. Okay, so what I want to show you here, first of all, this is the observed average daily gain in this set of heifers. Remember, they get nothing but hay and mineral. This is the observed hay intake. Here I've just highlighted two heifers that are both eating. And this, again, we have a 21-day adaptation period in these studies, and then about 70 days of measuring feed intake and weight gain. So they're on this program for quite a while. These two heifers over that long period of time both averaged 17 pounds of hay intake, about group average, right? About 17 pounds of grass hay a day. And how incredible is it that one of these heifers is gaining 1.4 pounds a day, and one of them is actually losing weight, eating exactly the same amount of forage. Now, which one of those do you think has the best opportunity to become a cow that can thrive or survive? Well, probably thrive in a moderate to low quality forage environment. I think this heifer is going to be a rock star. We are going to find out, but to me, that's just really exciting and really, really neat. You can see lots of variation in feed intake and performance when we feed these cattle nothing but hay. Okay, let's talk just a minute about efficient cows. Each year, we're testing the replacement heifers that you saw on that previous slide, and then we gather the 4-year-old lactating cows that have their third calf at side, and we test them for a lactation period of about 90 days. We pull the calves off, wean the calves, turn the cows out for a couple of weeks to let them dry up, and then we bring them back into the Range Cow Research Center facility that I showed you earlier, and we test them as a gestating cow for another 90 days, again, consuming nothing but long stem hay and mineral. Let me show you what some of the things we've discovered. Again, I'll show you kind of some of these outliers. We're able to, at least in this is Sam Talley's data from just last year, last winter, but Sam was able to predict feed intake in this set of cows pretty well. R squared, or he was able to explain 66% of the variation in cow intake based on these bacteria right here. So bigger cows consume more, as you would expect. Cows that gain better consume more, as you would expect. Cows that produce more milk actually consumed more feed, as you would expect. And fatter, fleshier cows consume less based on this negative body condition score relationship. Interestingly, the cows that are a little heavier muscled based on ultrasound ribeye area per unit of body weight, they actually consumed a little bit more forage. That's interesting. Not sure what to do with that yet, but it's pretty cool, I think. Pretty interesting. Okay, so this is a group of cows that Sam tested. This is their lactation period, and I just want to show you a couple of these cows. Sam found one cow in his group, pointed out right here. This is the observed dry matter intake. This graph's a little different than the previous one because this is observed dry matter intake. And down here, what we've got is the predicted dry matter intake she should be eating based on this line through the middle. And that is based on her weight, the amount of milk she's producing, the amount of, say milk, anyway, her body condition score and her ultrasound ribeye area. You can see that this cow is supposed to be consuming 33 pounds of hay. She's actually consuming 38. She does not give very much milk. She's losing weight throughout the study. I'm not showing that to you here, but she was actually losing weight throughout the study, and not producing much milk, but she still eats a lot. She's a big eater and she's not very productive. Okay, contrast that cow to one right down here. She's only consuming a little over 28 pounds a day. Based on her productivity, she should be consuming 35 pounds of hay a day. Now, this cow is giving a lot of milk. She's gaining weight. So think about that. She's producing a lot of milk, consuming nothing but hay, and gaining weight at the same time. I mean, how cool is that? She'll have below average feed intake year round. In fact, when we stretched this out and annualized it based on her gestation and lactation forage intake, this cow would consume on average over a ton of forage less in a year, and she is still very productive. All right, so let me just summarize here and say that cattle have changed rapidly since the 1940s. I hope I've made that point to you, and they continue to change today. And it's important for us in the cow-calf segment of the industry to consider how those changes might be affecting your cost and your ability to control costs. We think cow-calf operations, based on several good data sets, should focus more on cost. Yes, output and production, fertility, weaning weight, all those things are important. Explained a little over a third of that difference in high profitability and low profitability producers. But those should be actually secondary to focus on cost in a grazing enterprise. Cow weight EPD plus that dry matter intake EPD, again, I hope you agree, are powerful tools. And I think we can use them to control cow costs. And we shared several examples with how you might do that today. One issue, though, one problem is, especially the feed intake EPD, it's expensive and labor intensive to collect that data. But our industry would benefit substantially, especially now that we know we can use that feed intake EPD to control costs in the cow herd. Our industry would benefit substantially if we could get more phenotypes that the breed associations recorded on both of those traits. Now, the cow weight trait isn't very expensive. Yeah, it's a little more time consuming to weigh those cows when you wean your calves. And yes, more record keeping, and you seed stock producers obviously would have to send that in. But let me tell you, these two pieces of data are critical and represent tremendous opportunity for us to get more efficient in the cow-calf segment of the industry as time goes by. We're having a lot of fun in our research program here at OSU. I'm just really excited about some of the things that we're learning. We have discovered cattle that absolutely excel in forage utilization, and those are the animals that we need to find, and we certainly intend to do that. Current effort focused on finding a solution to identify forage efficient cattle without having to conduct one of these expensive feed intake tests like we're doing here at OSU with those feeders that I showed you. That's a lot of work. These graduate students work hard. We have to clean out those feeders about once a week to once every 10 days. Let me tell you, that's a job. But hopefully, as time goes by here, and I think we are getting a little bit closer to finding a way to identify these cattle out in the pasture that are consume moderate amount of forage, yet are very productive. That's our goal. Okay, Mallory, that's the end of my presentation. I hope there will be a few questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Lalman, again for joining us tonight. We've got two questions already in the Q&A box that I'm happy to read off for you if you're ready.
You bet.
Awesome. And then I'm sure there'll be more roll in as time goes on. Starting off, when it comes to supplementing, does it help with cows with production and help them prepare to calve? And ultimately, when you are feeding the female, does it help the calf to grow off of if supplementing?
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, so there, there's nutritional programming in a calf. And that has to come from the cow early in its life, of course. And so, yeah, there is an influence of calf growth when that calf is still in utero. And so if the cow is undernourished in general, that calf is not going to be as productive as it matures. And certainly what we try to do is we recommend to our producers to try to manage your cow calf operation to calve those cows in about a body condition score 5. Maybe the first calf heifers in about a body condition score 6. So a lot of you, depending on your forage quality, will have to use some sort of a supplementation program to achieve that goal. And if you just use that as kind of a guideline, if your cows come in the fall and body condition score 4 or something like that, below average, you might need to wean those calves a little earlier and provide a supplement to help them make up ground before you get to the dead of winter and before you get to late gestation. Hope I answered that question okay, Mallory.
Great. And then the next one we have in our Q&A box. When you think of crossbreeding, has anyone thought about using Simmental bulls to gain more muscle and weight gain? What's your opinion behind crossbreeding with Simmental bulls?
Cool. I'm glad you asked that question, and I'm going to share my screen again. I was hoping we have an opportunity to talk about this, but I am not a geneticist, and you all have got really good group of geneticists there. But let me just show you this. Can you see that okay, Mallory? Yeah, okay. So I was fortunate to get to spend a little bit of time with Dr. Larry Cundiff. He is a legendary genetics professor, and he spent a good bit of his career at the Meat Animal Research Center there in Nebraska. And most of his work had to do with this question of crossbreeding. Okay, and I was with him in Florida when he presented these slides to a group of ranchers that, I mean, for crying out loud, each one of these ranchers would have had, I don't know, maybe a minimum of 2,500 cows, and some of them had more than 10,000 cows. But this was his message to them. This was just a few years ago. Here's the effect of crossbreeding right here. So if you got straight bred cows and straight bred calves, you get a bump. This is the heterosis effect, or the bump. Straight bred cows, crossbred calves, you're going to have that 8.5% or so bump. But the really big impact is with crossbred cows, okay, because you increase fertility and longevity. And so here's the number now. When you're using a crossbred cow and breeding them to another bull for a crossbred calf, you get over that cow's lifetime. Let's see, what's he say here? Heterosis increases production per cow is 50% Bos indicus by Bos taurus. Heterosis increases production per cow 20 to 25% in Bos taurus by Bos taurus crosses. So that is amazing. 20 to 25% more calf weight to sell over their lifetime due to crossbreeding. So I hope that answered that question.
Awesome, good deal. And then we have one more that popped up in our Q&A box here. A couple more actually. Have you been able to detect any negative correlation with selecting for smaller, more efficient cows, such as problems with calving or less vigorous newborn calves?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, we aren't selecting for small cows. So maybe I should say that first. I mean, we haven't aggressively selected for low birth weight or small cows. We're selecting for efficient cows. And really the size of our cow hasn't changed very much yet. Because we're really just getting a good start on this effort. It'll take several years for us to begin to expand. Like that really good heifer is gaining 1.4 pounds a day. You're darn right. We intend to flush her and expand those genetics. And that cow that's only eating 28 pounds a day should be eating 35 or whatever. Yeah, we are definitely going to collect some embryos from her as well. And we'll get there. But no, it doesn't have much to do with cow size. I will say that, and again, your genetics folks would be better to address this. But we have found in our commercial data, if we collect calf birth weight on a commercial operation, which rarely happens, but we found a few here in Oklahoma that were doing that and measured calf birth weight. And then again, weaning weight. And what we found was for every 1 pound, every 1 pound lower calf birth weight, we got 2 pounds lower weaning weight. Okay. So, as far as calf birth weight, and that's not the question you asked, but as far as calf birth weight goes, it looks like to us on just commercial operations, boy, you don't want to go too far because you're giving up some of that production by getting too carried away selecting for light calf birth weight. Obviously, you don't want to have dissociation issues in your heifers, but on the mature cows, it doesn't make a lot of sense to aggressively select against birth weight and select, use that calving ease direct as the geneticist would tell us to do.
Great. And then our next question, how does the research factor in forage quality on feed intake, assuming higher quality feed source results in higher feed intake? I've heard that the cows will eat a more higher quality hay than a low quality hay. Does this factor into ADG?
Well, yes, and you're right. You're correct. The higher the quality, meaning the higher the protein and digestibility of the hay, the more the cows will consume, yes, and the more they will gain, yes. So, I mean, that's absolutely right. Now, we're trying to do our research program with Bermuda grass hay that's right around 11-12% protein and probably in that high 50s for TDN or energy. And so it's pretty nice grass hay. But as you can see there, those heifers, they'll average about a pound a day weight gain. Compare that to the energy dense kind of bull test diets, those heifers would gain well over 2 pounds a day and bulls would gain nearly 3 to 3.5 pounds a day. So pretty big difference there.
Awesome. Then up next, does the research consider the cost difference associated with selling larger calves versus smaller calves, but having more to sell?
Well, I see a lot of those comparisons and publications, and that's how that almost always turns out, right? The smaller cow, and again, you're using cow weight there as a proxy for feed intake. Okay, that is the idea that you can run more smaller cows because they consume less forage, and on average, that's true. And so, yes, I see those publications all the time, and I think they're accurate. You have the reduction in cow size increases your stocking capacity, and you sell more calves. And actually, if calf weaning weight is a little bit lighter, they actually bring more per pound. So all the comparisons, economic comparisons I have seen, with, with moderate sized cows compared to really big cows. The moderate sized cows almost always wins. But again, I just want to emphasize that what we're trying to do, what I'm encouraging you to do with the dry matter intake EPD and the mature cow weight EPD is go beyond just selecting for small cows. You can select for moderate sized cows, let's say 1150 to 1200 pound cows. Not that that's perfect. You be you decide what fits you best. But within that cow size, you can select females that don't have, or out of sires that don't have tremendous appetite. And I think that's what where we can make progress.
Okay. What is the explanation for the differences between the cows that consume less and gain more, i.e. breed, genetics, anatomy, or something else?
Really good question, and it's a hard one to answer. We honestly, there are a lot of people working on that question, not necessarily in cows, but feed efficient calves that are, finishing cattle, growing heifers, consuming an energy dense diet. There's a lot of that research going on, trying to figure out what the mechanism is for cattle that are more efficient. And we're so early on, and one of the few in the country doing work on straight forage, we don't have a whole lot of those answers. But I can tell you what the other group has discovered. Cattle that consume moderate amount of feed but gain more. A few of the things that appear to be different. One, those animals appear to have lower maintenance energy requirements. Okay, that's a big deal. The maintenance requirement is just a big chunk of your annual costs, especially in a cow. Another thing that's different is that at the cellular level, some of these cattle have really efficient, efficient cell metabolism. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, and they are better at converting, ATP. Mallory probably remembers that from biochemistry, but
flashbacks and not good ones.
Nightmares. But it improved mitochondrial efficiency appears to be part of that, and a lot of other things that frankly I don't understand. But that appears to be part of it. Third piece, it looks like there is differences in the rumen microbiome, meaning the bacterial population in the rumen. Okay, so that influences diet digestibility. Cattle that are more efficient tend to have a little bit higher, it's not dramatic, but a little bit higher diet digestibility because of those differences in rumen microbiome. So those are some of the things that influence these differences in efficiency, and the academic community is working hard to try to figure that out.
Good deal. Our next question. When feeding hay, how many hours should the hay be available in a 24-hour period?
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question too, because you can restrict their access to hay, or if you are really short of hay in a drought year, we do that a lot here in Oklahoma, drought years. And we have years where we don't have much carryover and then go into a drought. So if you don't have much hay carryover and then you go into a drought and you don't produce much hay, it's like 2011, 2012 all over again for us. And that question gets to be pretty popular. I have very restricted hay supply. How can I stretch it? And what we discovered by looking through the papers that have been published on that question and doing some of our own work is that we could actually restrict cows, open the gate, let them into the hay, 6 hours later, push them out, shut the gate. And we could kind of maintain with good quality hay and mature cows, we could maintain their body condition doing that in 6 hours. And we cut their hay intake by quite a bit. So normally if they'd eat 30 pounds of hay and we restricted them to 6 hours of intake, we could cut it, as I recall, somewhere around 25 pounds of hay intake. Okay, so that technique actually works pretty good. Now, we don't recommend doing that with 2-year-olds. We don't recommend it doing that with old cows that don't have good teeth. It actually works pretty good. So, you know, and the more hours you let them access hay, the more they're closer they're going to get to that 30 pounds of it.
Okay, and then I have one more question in our Q&A box. And then we'll wrap up. Can you give us an idea of a moderate cow weight? It's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, to me, so there's a North Dakota group has a really nice, one of these really nice performance and economic cow databases where they have different ranches adding to those. Their cow weight in 2023, their average program cow weight was 1,400 pounds. And so that's kind of the average cow weight in North Dakota. In my opinion, 1,150 to 1,200 pound female is a moderate sized cow. Why do I say that? We finish our own steers, okay, and sell cattle from a spring herd and a fall herd. After finishing, sometimes we send the spring steers to wheat and then send them to the feed yard. Most of the time, the fall born calves will go about 60 to 80 days on grass and then they'll go to the feed yard. But you know, out of 1,175 to 1,200 pound cows, we are producing 1,450 to 1,550 pound finished cattle every day of the week. Okay, so we don't need 1,400, 1,500 pound cows to produce 930 pound carcasses. We can do it with 1,150 to 1,200 pound cows. I'm glad you brought that up. One more story, Mallory. Last year, we had the graduate students named this steer Ralphie. Okay. The day we shipped Ralphie, I should have brought a picture for you all to see, but the day we shipped Ralphie, he weighed 2,005 pounds. His mother at weaning in a body condition score of 5 weighed about 1,170. So his carcass was 1,200, it's 1,284, I think, 1,284 pounds. So his carcass was 100 pounds heavier than his mother.
Ralphie was a monster.
He's big. He wasn't tall, but he was a tank.
The dense guy.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I think that wraps up all of our questions in our Q&A box, actually. Again, thank you, Dr. Lalman, for joining us tonight. I know we've kept you on the hook in Tennessee Extension over this past year. I'll give you a plug. If anybody has any time on this rainy weekend, please go to the Beef and Forage Center's YouTube page and visit Dr. Lalman's YouTube podcast that we recorded with him back in June when BIF was in Knoxville, and that was super exciting to get to sit down with him and discuss about his research and some of his program aspects a little bit more with Dr. Mason and Dr. Pedrera as well. So be sure to tune into that as well if you're sitting around the house on a rainy day and want to watch something again. But with all that being said, if anyone has any questions regarding their attendance or certification questions, contact me, Dr. Mason, or your local extension agent, and we'll be sure to get those squared away. If anyone thinks of any questions for Dr. Lalman as well after the webinar ends tonight, I'd be happy to send those his way and we'll get those squared away as well. But
Mallory, let me say thank you to you and to your group and to all those producers that spent an hour of their plus of their time with us here. I'm grateful that you would do that. So, yeah, and send some of that rain our direction, please.
We'll send more than probably you want if we had the choice. But again, thank you so much, and I think that wraps us up. So good night, everybody.